make sure we get started on time. First off, I just want to let you know that we are recording tonight, so please start the recording now. I'm supposed to say that into the mic to make sure they start recording it. Our evening tonight is going to be recorded and put up onto YouTube, so we sent that link out on the letter that you received, so if we don't have the turnout that we usually have, I just want to mention that again so that if you are having people that are interested in some of the things we cover tonight, they can see the program there. I also want to make sure that we make an announcement for translation is available.
Hola, buenas noches. Yo estoy aquí para proveer servicios de interpretación. Si alguien necesita en español, se puede acercar.
All right, so I just want to thank everyone for coming out this evening. My name is Julia Kemke. I'm the Director of Secondary Ed, and we have a really a full agenda tonight, so I'm going to really just jump into it. I want to welcome a few people here that have come to help us with our program. We have Karen Brown from, she's an associate of Dr. Bruez, and she's come to both be here for our parent evenings, and she's training our teachers tomorrow and then our administrators on Thursday. We also have our instructional coach, Jen Larson, a teacher, Karen Freemantle, and two parents who are brave enough from our GATE leadership team to speak reluctantly a little bit to share out about it, Cora Versace and Kate McNear. So we appreciate them. And then I really want to recognize Michelle Stevens, who is our coordinator of elementary ed. She has put countless hours into these meetings and everything that we do for GATE, and we just really appreciate everything she's done. She's in fact doing her master's thesis around how to serve gifted students, so I just really appreciate the work she's put into it. So without further ado, I want to talk about what we're going to do this evening. The first thing we're going to do is talk about our GATE leadership team meetings and kind of update you on how those have gone. Again, we have our parents and our teacher and our instructional coaches, so you can just get the perspective from their side of the things we've talked about and updates. They're going to continue. We've asked the team that's there to continue on a 2-year commitment, just because we feel like we've gotten some good discourse going and we can continue that. The other thing that I just want to mention kind of informally now, and we'll have some more information about that soon, is that we recognize that these meetings are kind of formal and we want to invite some more informal kind of conversations. The GATE leadership teams are great and we're a little slightly less formal, but next year we're going to start doing some monthly coffee chats is what we're calling them. So 8 o'clock once a month we're going to have a topic and invite you to come in and talk to us about it and talk a little bit more informally about questions that you have and that kind of thing. So we'll maybe do a pilot of what that looks like at the end of this year. Just wanted to mention that as one of the main objectives of our time here tonight is to give you some information, but we know sometimes information is not best served in these kind of large meetings. We want to make sure that we're able to communicate in other venues as well. So once we go through the GATE leadership team updates, we're going to move on to our identification process this year. We know that there's always some curiosity on how we continue to identify our gifted students, and we've made some changes this year with Michelle's research into what other districts do and that kind of thing, so there'll be some exciting updates around that. We'll go briefly, we're not going to go into the results of the GATE survey. We want to encourage more people to encourage others to take the survey. We'll look at it real briefly and talk about how we're going to use those results. And then we have Karen here, like I mentioned, to talk about what are some of the strategies that we're really focusing on from the teacher's perspective, and she'll give you some good descriptions and understanding so you can talk to your children about what they should be experiencing in the classroom. And then finally, it seems a little random, but there's been questions around what our middle school math pathways look like and how that intersects with our gifted population, and so we'll address that in the program as well. And then we'll have probably just a short time for question and answers. And again, we recognize that we usually have a lot more questions than we have time, and that's why I mentioned that we're going to try to do some of those more informal kind of coffee chat types of things. So if you have some lingering questions after today, there'll be some more time for them with us. All right, so I want to make sure we move quickly on to the first topic because I know our representatives from the GATE leadership team. This is the first year we've done this. I think that it historically was done maybe 8 years ago. We don't have our resident historian, Ruth Ann, here tonight, but at some point we had done GATE leadership teams, and we brought that back this year, knowing that we needed to improve communication. So we've met 3 times for 2 hours each as a team, and the real objective is just to start sharing out and begin getting a collective understanding of what we're doing with our GATE program. And having some reps, parent reps on there, teacher reps, and instructional coaches, so that people could share and have a real deep discourse about what's happening. So what we want to do now is have our parent reps come up and just share a little bit about their experience on it. Again, it's just what, from their perspective, what they've found from that group and what they learned. So I'm going to ask Cora and Kate, come on up. You can come up as a team, too.
There's safety in numbers.
Yeah.
Hello. So I'm Kate McNear, and I'm one of the volunteers, parents, to serve on the GATE leadership team this year. I'm a Linwood representative. Let's see. So as you heard, we've had 3 meetings this year, and there's 1 more scheduled. I'm really happy to say that all of the parent volunteers, I feel like, have really taken their positions very seriously and have really worked hard to try to represent what we're hearing from you all. And I think, I really appreciate the time and energy that the teachers and the coaches and the staff have put into it, because it really has been, I think it really has been a huge improvement for communication. And I think that, communication, I think, for parents has been a concern. And so I think this is a step in the right direction. Some positive highlights. I think there's been good work done around the identification process, which Michelle's going to talk about. Let's see, I think that, we reviewed some of the older survey results, and we did have a lot of input on the new survey, so I'm really happy to hear that that's going to be open, it sounds like, for a while longer. I hope you will all take that survey so we can get some more feedback. And I think the kids are going to be, the kids will be surveyed as well, so we'll get a little more feedback on their own experiences at school. Let's see. We also had some input on the letter to students of newly identified, or parents of newly identified students. We didn't have input on the initial letter that went out, but on the second one, they welcomed us in, and we really were happy about that. I think that we've had a lot of explanation and discussion as to how the cluster model is being implemented in the classrooms. And, I really appreciate the time and effort that the educators have put into talking about that with us. As a parent representative, the feedback that I've gotten from parents seems to indicate that parents fall into 4 categories, some of them overlapping. I think there are parents who understand the cluster model, but who are concerned about proper and consistent implementation across all of the schools and all of the classrooms. There are parents who are concerned because the model is only being applied in English and social studies, this is the middle school level, and not in the other subjects. And I think Julie is going to talk at least about math this evening. There are parents who may understand the cluster model, but who just don't believe it's the best method for instruction and would like to see other options on the table for middle school. I would include myself in this group. And I expect there are parents that are quite satisfied, although, they're not the ones that tend to reach out to us. I think that our experience has been mixed. I think that the things that we have talked about and dealt with, again, the communication has been open. I think that's great. I believe that we've had some positive influence as parents. And I really appreciate the opportunities for collaboration. There are some topics that have not been on the table. I'm hoping those will come on the table in the future. And yeah, that's about it for me. So thank you.
Ditto. No, I'm just kidding. So I was really trying to rack my brain getting ready for this to think about what are the thoughts that I have? How do I sort those into some meaningful way? What are the thoughts that I have that you actually may be interested in? Like, what are your needs? And as I was doing that, I kept thinking and realizing that our kids are at the center of all of that. And that brought me to the conclusion of our kids are really the reason that we do everything that we do. And all the things that we do are for them, right? So not just our daily tasks of making sure that they're fed and that they get to school and they, get a bath at night, all those things, but really the bigger things in life that we do for our kids so that they can grow into their best self as an adult. And so I found this quote from Dr. Seuss from the Lorax, which I thought was really appropriate of, it's not about what it is, it's about what it can become. And I think that's so true for our kids. I also think that's true about this committee. So Kate and I were asked to speak about our experience on the GATE Leadership Committee that, we mentioned was just recently reinvigorated. And I think overall that experience in the Leadership Committee meeting has been very positive from a parent perspective. I have found that when we come to the meetings and we say, we're not clear on this topic. So an example of that would be, we're not clear on how GATE students are being taught with any kind of differentiation in the middle school. The very next meeting, they had a bunch of examples, and we dedicated a majority of the meeting to the teachers being able to share with us, here's how we differentiate GATE in the classroom. Here's questions that you can ask your child about their experience so that they can understand, because nobody's saying your child or to the child, here's your GATE instructions. It doesn't work that way, right? And we wouldn't want it to work that way. So it was really helpful to see that we could come and say, this is a real big question and concern for us. And then at the next meeting that we could hear directly from the teachers and the coaches for the teachers, the development coaches, about how they're implementing that. And also Kate mentioned that we got to see we were able to have an opportunity to provide input on the letters that you received as a newly identified GATE parent. And that came up completely organically as we were reviewing the survey that's out. And we said, hey, could we look at that letter too? And they said, sure. And within a few weeks, whoever was available on that Friday morning was able to get together and look at that letter together. So I just think that it's another example of that collaboration, and that's what I'm hoping we continue to see. So with all that being said, the leadership team is still new, and so it is still being developed. There are things that we're doing well, I think, and there's still opportunities for us to continue to be better at things, which takes me right back to that same Dr. Seuss quote, which is, it's not about what it is, but it's about what it can become. So thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, now I'm going to ask Karen Fremantle and Jen Larson are going to come and talk about their experience on the GATE leadership team from the teacher and the instructional coach perspective, as well as share a couple instructional strategies that they've,
Hi, I'm Karen Fremantle. I teach 4th grade at Rancho Elementary School in Novato, and I also am a parent of 3 students who are going through our school system, a senior at San Marin High, so I'm not allowed to ask him about anything regarding homework or otherwise. I didn't know that was a rule, but it is. A freshman at San Marin High School, and then I have a 5th grader at Rancho. So I have run the gamut, and I am a product of Novato schools. I'm really grateful for the opportunity that I've had to sit on this committee. I feel like it's been a great opportunity because I'm sitting now as a teacher, but I also am the parent of a GATE student. So I have kind of come through this system and had a variety of feelings about it. I feel like it's been a really great opportunity to get some clarity for the parents and for us as teachers, for what you are looking for as parents, things you need to understand, and also an opportunity to really think in moving forward with this program what's really important. And one of the things that I feel is that it's really important for us as teachers to educate you as parents as to what we're doing in the classroom. And it's a push-pull for me because you're great, but your kids are my first priority. And so it's this whole, a little bit of a conundrum for me, because what I really want to be focusing on is your kids. but I recognize the importance because even as a parent, as I'm listening to the things that are happening, the importance of you understanding what this looks like, because it doesn't always look like what we as parents maybe think that it might look like. So here's what I want to just share a quick snapshot for you. If you were to walk into my classroom, fourth grade, on a daily basis, you would probably see at a glance, depending on the time you showed up, you'd see kids working in small groups. They might be working on a math activity or a language arts activity. But what you wouldn't see without a closer look or probably talking with me is that the activities are very differentiated. And I don't say to my kids, now we're going to do some differentiated learning here, and you're going to take this to level 1 and you're going to level 4, because they don't care. They just want to learn. They just want to be doing and be involved. So without you knowing what I know or communicating with me, you wouldn't necessarily see that. You would just see them involved in different activities and engaged and probably chatting back and forth and having fun, hopefully. What you might see would be a book club meeting, and you'd see discussion, and you'd see agreement and disagreement, and you would see them learning how to converse academically and intellectually. But again, without understanding or talking with me, you wouldn't know that I very specifically put kids in the groups that they're in. And while some may be just diving into the upper levels of some of our literature, other groups would be going much deeper, depending on their comfort and skill level. But I'm going to put them in a place where it pushes their learning, but it doesn't overwhelm them, and it challenges their thinking, hopefully without intimidating them. Because I really feel like my number one job as a teacher of children of every level is that I need to foster their desire and their love of learning. And as a GATE parent, I have learned over the years that that doesn't mean faster, it doesn't mean more, it doesn't mean harder, in the sense of my goal isn't to take them to the point where I stump them. My goal is to challenge their mindset. My goal is to help them love discovering and be okay with the struggle that learning sometimes is. My goal is for them to want to come back more, or to be willing to question things from maybe a different perspective, or look at things from a different angle. And Jen will talk about some strategies we use to do that specifically. But if you were just to come in and peek at what's going on in my classroom, you would just see kids involved in their learning. And my fourth graders would just tell you, well, here's what I did today, because really, honestly, they don't always pay attention to what anybody else is doing, because they're 9 and 10, and they're pretty sure the world still revolves around them, as it should be. What you would see if you walk through my class regularly is that the groups change. It's not always the same groups of kids in their activities. It depends on what they're learning. It depends on their comfort level. You wouldn't see the pre-testing that I do to see who's ready to move a little quicker here, who needs a little more depth there, and developing groups based on that. So it's very fluid, it's very changing, it's very constant. If you came into my classroom today, you would have seen us talking about Dr. Seuss, because what a great opportunity to teach theme. And in Dr. Seuss, at a very basic level, you can start to learn that there's a difference between main idea and what's happening in a story, and theme, what the author wants you to understand. Maybe it's courage. Maybe it's friendship. And some of the kids are very comfortable with that. However, at the same time, we're throwing back and forth questions, and here are some kids down here recognizing, oh, wait a minute, there's some political implications happening with Dr. Seuss. Horton Hears a Who, and protecting the environment, and the Lorax, and all of these things, and talking about some really big ideas, and sitting and just thinking on that. And some of them are still up here talking about how it's important to have courage. It's important to not let strangers into your home, Cat in the Hat. It's important, and that's where they are, and that's very appropriate. But at the same time, the other ones are allowed to swim a little bit deeper and go a little bit further with their learning. And that, to me, is a really successful opportunity for them to interact together at the level where they need to be. I have loved being on this GATE committee. It's really enlightening to me. I feel like it's a great opportunity for us to work together as a community to strengthen learning opportunities for our kids. I agree. It's an evolving process, but I think it's a really positive one. I hope that the communication continues to be open and strong, because I think it comes back to that it's about your kids, and gosh, they're sure worth the time. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jen Larson. I'm one of the instructional coaches. I'm a secondary instructional coach, and I have the great opportunity of working with the middle school GATE teachers because of my previous teaching background in middle school and also in GATE clusters. So one thing that we really took away from this GATE Leadership Committee was how important it was for us as teachers, and Karen touched on this, to let parents know and to educate parents as to what those differentiation strategies look like. And while we talk about what's happening in our classroom, as Karen mentioned, we don't necessarily talk about what each specific student is doing or what each specific group's topic is, or even which questions some of those groups are being asked, because they're involved in what they're doing. They're involved in the group they're in. And so we wanted to make sure that some of those examples that we shared with that GATE leadership team were shared with you guys tonight. And I'm really looking forward to some of the coffee discussions that we're going to be having next year, because I think it gives us more of an opportunity to show some of those examples. So what I'm going to do is, again, give you an indication or an example of what Karen was talking about with what you might see as you walked into a classroom would be a bunch of kids in small groups answering questions. And I'm going to give you an example. This comes from a 6th grade class. Actually, you know what? Let's pause for a minute. Do I have it? Here. Okay, I'm actually going to start with the depth. Regardless of what the topic is, one thing that we use a lot in our GATE cluster classrooms, and has been so successful that you're going to see it in just about every classroom in NUSD now, are the icons of depth and complexity. And these icons have been developed for teachers to have a common language with their students to let them know how and in what way we want to analyze a piece of work. It could be a piece of art, it could be a photograph, it could be a text. Okay, often we will use them to analyze another student's work. But by having these very simplistic icons, it's a symbol for the students to have an understanding of where we want to go with our analysis. If you look at these icons, as I said, they're very simple. For example, language of the discipline, we've got a set of lips. It's simply an indication to the students that we need you to look and dive in deep and find the words that are really important for us to understand in order to feel and know what the author is trying to tell us. So it's about vocabulary. Details, what are the main details that we need to know to understand content? But then we get into some much deeper ideas, multiple perspectives. Now that we've read this article, let's think about how multiple people would have read this. How would they have looked at this situation? And so these are a very simple way in a common language, and you heard Karen use the word big idea. Okay, they're built into our classroom culture. They're built into our classroom conversations, into our note-taking, and it's a very simple way for us to ask students to dive deeper into what they're doing. As the students get older and move on to middle school, we aren't just using these icons. Now we're teaching them how to decide which of these icons are more appropriate than others for analyzing a certain type of text. So they're actually starting to guide some of their own learning and some of their own analysis. Moving on, I'm going to give you an example of some of those questioning strategies. As Karen mentioned, a lot of times you'll walk into a classroom. This was a lesson about, this is an ancient Egypt unit. The students had been just talking about the Hebrew leaders. And you can see that in their discussions walking around the room, you probably just hear similar discussions about who those Hebrew leaders were. If you really got in close and you really listened for what the students were talking about, some of those groups of students would be on level 1, which is recall. Recall types of questions may be along the lines of identify the 4 Hebrew leaders of ancient Egypt. Those students who are paired up or in groups for level 4 may be looking at how are they going to prove that those 4 Hebrew leaders actually helped Judaism develop. So you can see right there that while they're talking about the exact same content, the depth of knowledge that was necessary for group 4 to move through was vastly different. those students in level 1 are still just trying to grasp the basic understanding, the basic content that we need them to grasp in 6th grade. Our level 4 extended thinkers, they're ready to move past that. They probably could have passed that basic chapter test before we started the chapter. We want them to have an opportunity to now have discussions in groups of like-minded students on some of that the more in-depth topics. Again, looking at another question, why did God request that Abraham sacrifice his son Isaac? That's basic details. Can you identify information and recall it? Whereas level 4 may ask, connect modern-day refugee issues with the Hebrews' experience in ancient Egypt. A very different challenge. So this might be an example of what you're seeing on the outside is just a bunch of small groups talking about the ancient Hebrews. But when you get down to the nitty-gritty and you look at what they're really talking about, there's a very big difference. The third example that we had to share with you is tiered lessons. Again, this is another lesson from Egypt. And you'll see that rather than just have different questions, different ways to discuss and analyze the information, this is actually how they're going to prove that they know the information. So in this activity, there was a very clear content objective, but the way that the students were then going to be grouped and asked to show their knowledge was vastly different. Someone who is in that entry-level group may just need to illustrate that they understand the Egyptian social pyramid. Those kids who are ready for more of a challenge down in the extension level group are going to actually put themselves in the shoes of another person. So they're going to be an architect, and they're actually going to have to design and figure out what a tomb would look like for someone in any one of those specific social groups. So again, they have to have that same content knowledge, but it's the fact that they're going to be doing so much more and so much, they're going to have a little bit more creative thought into how they're going to produce that information. All right, thank you.
Okay, again, I just want to thank our GATE leadership team members. By the end of our meetings together, will have put in an 8-hour time with us, and we're going to continue with them next year. If we do have any of them that opt to step down, we'll probably ask and reach out to people to replace them. And as you guys remember, when we set up the GATE leadership team, we have representatives from our cluster schools, a self-contained program, and teachers from those programs as well. So we're going to stay with those same representatives and the same kind of setup for next year. So we'll let you know if we need some more participants, but we hope we'll have a 2-year commitment for the ones that are on there. So we want to move on real quickly to Michelle, who's going to update us on the identification process. All right.
Hi, I'm Michelle Stevens, the Elementary Curriculum Coordinator, and it was so interesting to hear all the perspectives, so thank you so much for speaking tonight. I would like to share with you that this year we screened the students in 3rd grade for GATE identification, and we were able to qualify 39 3rd grade students out of 540, which is roughly 7%. We were also able to qualify 6 4th grade students who were either new or being reevaluated, and 6 5th grade students who were also new or being reevaluated, for a total of 51 students that were identified to receive gifted or GATE services. When we're looking at students, we use multiple measures to determine that identification. We use quantitative measures, which one of those pieces is the Cognitive Abilities Test, also known as the COGAT, and that looks at a student's verbal, nonverbal, and quantitative measures. We also look at measures of academic progress, which you might be familiar with, the MAP scores. And we look at MARS math assessments, which are leveled math problems where students are encouraged to show their work, and they work through the basic level of the math problem through 4 levels to a more complex and challenging level. We also, if a student is an English learner, we look at the California English Language Development Test to look at that student's progress over time. We also look at qualitative measures, which the writing sample, this year the students wrote to a fantasy writing prompt. They were given 2 prompts to choose from. We also look at referrals, endorsements, comments from teachers, principals, parents, or any other student advocate. And we also take into consideration cultural, special needs, or socioeconomic factors that could be masking a student's academic potential. When we're looking at these scores, we use something called the Student Profile Matrix to put them all in one place so that we can have a detailed look at one student's profile at a time. And then we also have a binder where we keep all the students' work samples because we found this isn't enough. We need to go deeper. We need to look at how a student is thinking as they're solving math problems and take a detailed look at their writing to get a really well-rounded picture of individual students. The GATE Student Study Team is the team that looks at the student profiles and makes that determination for whether or not a student will receive GATE services. And the GATE Student Study Team is made up of 2 principals, the Linwood principal and also another elementary school principal that is rotated each year. The directors of elementary and secondary curriculum, Ruth Ann Bexton and Julia Kempke, and myself. And we also invite in a school psychologist to give us a deeper look into what the scores mean and a better understanding of how those scores can suggest or imply how a student's ability, their cognitive ability. And if needed, we invite in specialists to give us a deeper look at students with special needs and how those special needs may affect their learning and also their testing. What is different this year? Well, this year, as a district, we focused on restructuring the GATE identification process to more accurately identify English learners. English learners have traditionally been underrepresented in GATE programs, not just within our district, but nationwide. And our purpose in creating a more inclusive identification model is to really specifically identify those students who would benefit from GATE services that may have been overlooked using the past model of identification. How did we do it? Well, we attended a lot of GATE conferences and we connected with other GATE coordinators that are from districts similar to ours. We really focused on identifying those best practices and the latest information from other districts that have modified their GATE programs to be more inclusive. And we also conducted independent research on scholarly articles on the topic, really looking to identify those strategies for what would work. And specifically, what did we do? We looked at student scores in terms of like groups and similar cultural backgrounds. We looked for markers that were indicative of that high cognitive ability. Such as scoring high on the quantitative and nonverbal scores on the cognitive abilities test. And also moving 2 or more CELT levels in 1 year. What were the outcomes of this? We were able to identify more students this year who qualified to receive GATE services, including a higher percentage of English learners than in years past. This year, we were able to identify 4% of students who were English learners in 3rd grade who qualified to receive GATE services. Next steps, because we're always looking forward and we're always trying to improve our practices, we're going to be using a district-wide opt-out form for the COGAT test. And that will be for 3rd grade students and 4th and 5th grade students who have never been tested before. What does that mean for us as a district? Well, right now, only students whose parents signed the permission slip and turned it in, those were the only students we tested. If we do an opt-out form, only the parents who check that opt-out box and return the form will be excluded from testing. What we're hoping to do is we're hoping to broaden the testing so that we can get more students. We will also be testing earlier in January, and this is due to avoid the testing crunch that happens in February. The students take those MAP tests, and we really don't want to be working alongside of that and putting too much on the teachers and the students. So we're moving the process back a month into January. And this will all be posted on the district website. Parents will all be receiving letters letting them know this. And that is it for our identification. And now Julia will be briefly sharing the parent survey. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Again, I just want to recognize her for, she's literally probably put hundreds of hours into what she's done this year, and we're really proud of the results, so thank you. So as you heard earlier, our GATE leadership team helped us design the survey in hopes that we can get some really good results from our parents on how we're serving your students. The survey's going to continue to be open. One of our intention was to advertise it tonight to remind people to please take it. We'll take a brief look at it right now, and then we're going to take a deeper look at it at our GATE leadership team so that we can take a look at the results and talk about what next steps are going to be from it. So I'm going to link us to it just so we can see. And once we have more results, right now we have about 44, and I think we've sent it out to about 150, so we have about a third of our parents. Is that about right, 150? We have about a third of our parents answering. We would like to get it as close to 100% as possible so that we get a full understanding of what your experience is in the GATE program. So like I mentioned, we will go through this briefly, but once we get a full amount of the results, we'll post those to the website as well so you can see where we're at with how people are feeling about the GATE program. And then we'll also talk, like I said, at the next GATE leadership team meeting on what we're going to do with these results. You'll see that, real briefly, just about 50% of the parents were from the self-contained program, and about 50% were from the cluster programs, either at the middle school with about 36%, and then about 11% at the cluster. Then you'll see about a third of our parents probably from middle school, good third from 5th grade, and another 36% from our Linwood self-contained. So the 4th grade. We don't have any, we don't have any 3rd graders yet. And this one is talking about positive attitude. One means that there's a strong disagreement that they have a positive attitude about the available learning, and we have, looks about 3 people saying that right now. We're pretty excited about the positive results because, as we've shared with the GATE leadership team, is that they've been more negative in the past. So generally what we're seeing, like I said, I'm going to quickly go through this and then we'll post it to the website, is that on the left-hand side, or on the right-hand side, are people agreeing with these statements, strongly agreeing, and then the 1, 2, and the 3 is neutral. So I'll just scroll through this real quickly. 1 being willing to take risks, which is, we know, is really important for gifted students. Sometimes they don't want to take risks because they don't want to stumble. Differentiation. This one was important to us because we had a lot of conversation in the GATE leadership team about how it's important that some of those learning experiences are integrated into the classroom, particularly when you're talking about the cluster program at middle school or in the elementary classrooms that use the cluster program. Oh, thank you. So the 0 means that they didn't have a response, they didn't have an opinion about this. Interest been incorporated in the classroom. Again, a very important one. Certain learning weaknesses. Teachers help student become more competent in his or her learning weaker areas. And then this one obviously is one that we're really focused on is that I have enough information about how my child's learning program is differentiated to provide for his or her advanced learning ability. And you can see from this, we still have some work to do. We still have some parents that are feeling like they're not understanding well enough on how that differentiation is happening for their students. So again, I appreciate the quote earlier about how we're going to continue to focus on how we can give you a better insight into what's happening in the classroom. And then I am not going to go down to, we'll look at the individual results personally and take those into consideration. We'll share the overall results. Like I said, we'll post them to the website. We'll keep the survey open for a while longer. We'll see, hopefully we'll see an uptick in some responses over the next couple of weeks before our next GATE leadership team meeting, so we have some of that feedback.
Do you want me to go
Sure.
first? So I think it's this one.
That's right there.
And then just go to the next slide.
Is there any way to see that last one broken out by people who were in a cluster model versus isolated K class?
Yeah.
Is there any way, yeah, we need it down another level, because by itself, it doesn't really tell you anything, but if you saw it broken out by people who were in the isolated K class versus middle school versus the cluster model, I think it would tell you.
Sure, yeah.
I will try to do that, yeah.
I think that if we can't do it through the program that we used, we could probably do it, we could use the Excel sheet and do it. So, yeah, we could do that, and we can, again, try to figure out how to post those as well. It may take us a little bit more time for that part, because I don't think it does it automatically. But it's a good question, thank you. The other thing that I want to quickly address, and I really encourage you, if you have additional questions about this, to contact me directly or one of the middle school principals, because there's been a lot of questions around math and gifted and why we don't cluster or those types of things. One of the things that I want to really reiterate is that the differentiation that happens in classrooms is not just for the English Social Studies core classes at the middle school. Differentiation is what good teaching is. So a lot of those strategies that we mentioned earlier that teachers are being trained in are what a lot of our teachers use. The ones that you use in a math classroom are going to be different than the ones that you use in an English or social studies classroom. So 3 years ago now, I think it's 3 years ago now, we redesigned our middle school math pathways in accordance with the new Common Core state standards. There were quite a few changes to the middle school math expectations. There's significantly more expectations for students as they enter middle school at 6th grade. So what we do a lot at 6th grade, if you have a 6th grade student right now, you'll know this, is that we collect multiple data measures in order to determine what is the best pathway as they move through middle school math. And we know this is really important. There's a ton of research on how critical it is to identify early on where students are in math, because they may be doing fine, excelling in math early on, but as they hit the higher level abstract math classes, they begin to struggle if they're not placed appropriately at this age. So we do multiple measures, and once we have all of those results, we sit down and we determine how to place students based on those results. There's two pathways, one into a regular 7th grade course, and one is a compacted course. And what that means is that the students move through essentially 2 years of math in 1 year in their 7th grade year. And then you have, in their 8th grade year, they move it to Algebra 1. And they finish up a few of the standards that are left over from the 8th grade. With that compacted sequence, one thing that I always mention is that formally some of the standards that you see in Algebra 1 were in Algebra 2 in the previous standards. So even this pathway is significantly more rigorous than what we saw with the previous standards, and it's really important, again, that we are placing students correctly. What those dotted lines mean is that we do have some students, and we do look at students again in 7th grade. So for example, we know that there's a lot of cognitive growth that happens in the 7th grade year. So we reevaluate students in 7th grade to see if they should be going into the compacted, and then we do some enrichment in order to get them into the compacted class in their 8th grade year. And then The same thing for a few of our students that may have been accelerated too quickly. They may go down into 8th grade course. I don't know if we've had any students do that, but we know that it could be a possibility. The other thing that I want to mention is that we screen our 5th graders in order to determine whether or not there are any that need to be accelerated in some other manner. We found that there are a few exceptions that need to move more quickly through math. And we usually, may find them in the gifted population, but they're also just students that are purely gifted in mathematics. And so we screen them using similar methods that we've used to place students later on. So like I mentioned, I just wanted to clarify that. This is up on our website as well, a similar model. Maybe I should put this one because it actually is more clear. I'm happy with this image. There's a similar one up on our website, and it also will describe what the multiple measures are. So if you have additional questions, like I said, it would be good to contact me directly or the middle school principals as well. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Student goes from 7th grade course into the 8th grade algebra course in 8th grade. What about that piece that was covered in the 7th grade, 8th grade compact course that they didn't get?
Yeah, so we have, usually what we're able to do is that we give them a summer packet to work through, and we also, usually the instructional coaches will put that together based on what we've found in their test scores. So it will show us where and they also know what isn't covered. There's a few kids that we've done that with, and they've done just fine because they're motivated, and some of them have chosen not to go into that crossover path because they're like, we don't want to push it, so. But we try to screen at each grade level just because that's one of the things that and you guys are obviously aware of, that your children's cognitive abilities sprout up every once in a while, and so we're trying to be very cognizant of that fact too. So again, if you have additional questions about this, you should contact us more thoroughly. And if you're moving into 6th grade, there'll be some more information as you get into the middle schools as well. So now I want to move on into our guest presenter tonight, which is Karen Brown. I kept wanting to call her Karen Green. She's it's the same, color family, I guess. She's a colleague of Dr. Bruez, who you guys have met here before if you've come to some of our other meetings. And she's here with us to share some real specific strategies that she's going to be working with our teachers on, as well as our principals on, to support the teachers in implementing these in the classroom. So since we had her here in town, we figured we'd have her come out and share some of those with you as well. And then we'll wrap it up quickly.
Well, good evening. One of the things I want to talk to you about tonight is the fact that gifted students, all students, need to engage in what's called productive struggle. And oftentimes what happens with our gifted kids is they don't get that opportunity. Productive struggle is that piece where I'm in disequilibrium. I don't automatically know how to do this problem. And for many of our learners, particularly our gifted learners, that causes panic. But I'm the kid who knows the answer, remember? That's who I am. Well, no, that isn't who you are. You're a child who needs to learn how to struggle, because struggle is part of the learning process. But struggle is uncomfortable. There isn't a person in here who intentionally moves toward productive struggle. We don't. We're human. We figure out a way to get around it. I want these learners to be comfortable in that. We hear the word rigor constantly. We need more rigor in our classrooms. We need more rigor. Well, it'd be really nice if rigor came in a book, or if rigor came in a curriculum. It doesn't. Do you know where rigor comes from? Those people sitting up there. Rigor comes from what happens in the classroom. Rigor comes from what that teacher does with the content. And it's critically important for all of our learners that we embed these strategies and allow them those opportunities to be successful with it. So rigor comes from the fact that we flexibly group kids, that they're not, because we know that learners learn different things and at different times. It comes from allowing some children to be accelerated and some children to be enriched, because it depends on where I am as a learner, whether I need acceleration or whether I just need to go deeper in this content. One of the big things that rigor comes from is what we call task complexity. I don't want to make the task harder. I don't want to make the task more complicated. That's not complexity. Complexity requires the brain to engage in multiple ways. So I want you to think about that for a minute. You have many things that we do that are simply hard, but they're not overly complex. We have things that we do that are complicated, but they're not overly complex. We need our students engaged in complex learning strategies in multiple venues, whether it's in math, whether it's in science, whether it's in social studies, because those things engage the brain and keep kids excited about learning. Gifted kids need continuous progress. They need to grow every day, every day. And when we don't provide learning environments like that in a cluster classroom, in a self-contained classroom, they don't grow every day. A gifted child deserves to come home just like every other child does, saying, I learned something new today. That's important because that's what keeps us excited. So we want to ensure that our kids are getting that opportunity for productive struggle. So how do we do that? Well, one of the things that we can do are some strategies that your teachers have already talked to you about. Most difficult first is a strategy that says, you know what, you're going to listen to me for a few minutes, and then you're going to look at the 5 most difficult problems. If you can do those problems, then you're going to move on. Because if I can do the 5 most difficult problems, I don't need to practice the other 25. I already demonstrated to you that I know this concept. I'm ready to move on. We also want to talk about leveling the questions. And when we level questions, we create tiered assignments. We use multiple strategies to level questions. Depth of knowledge can be used, Bloom's taxonomy can be used. We have lots of ways that we can level those questions. And without leveling them, we are not providing the level of complexity that students need. So I'm going to have questions that are at a basic knowledge level, because that's where this learner is. I'm also going to have questions that are at a strategic thinking level, where I have to apply and reason with this content to be able to figure out where I need to go. But one of the things I want to make sure of is that I'm not asking a child to do more. Because you know what? Being gifted is not a punishment. And oftentimes gifted kids feel like, gee, my child was in kindergarten in a school where he came home after 2 weeks and he informed me that his teacher needed him to slow down. Now, knowing my child, I said, okay, are you doing your best? Mommy, I'm getting stars on everything. I said, okay, are you putting your name on your paper? Are you doing what you're supposed? She needs me to slow down. So, well, I'm not understanding what she needs, so tomorrow when I drop you off, I'm going to stop in. That's not necessary. Why? It's not necessary. You don't need to talk to her. I said, okay, yeah, now I think I do. What exactly did she say? And his response to me was heartbreaking because he'd been in kindergarten for 10 days. And he said, Mommy, she didn't exactly say slow down, but if I don't slow down, I get another packet, and I don't want to do another packet. He's 5. I don't want any gifted child to be punished for being bright. I need to do something different. I don't need to do more. I need to be thinking, and my thinking needs to be pushed to a higher level. You need to extend what I'm doing, not simply give me something more to do. We use compacting as a means of determining that you already know this information, now I need to move you on. Socratic thinking is one of the biggest things that we use with these learners because Socratic thinking is not about debate. And believe me, gifted learners are good at debate. They've got that down. They don't need any more practice debating. What they do need practice in is learning to think collaboratively. Thinking collaboratively means I have to listen to what you said. And I have to engage with you to reach a common understanding. I don't have to agree with you, but I have to listen and reach a common understanding with you. Because you have ideas to share and I have ideas to share. And in that Socratic process, we teach students that you can't just say things like, well, I disagree. You're wrong. No. You have the right to disagree, but you need to explain why. Upon what evidence are you basing your disagreement? What are you going to share with me to help me see where you're coming from? Now, as adults, we think, well, it's not all that hard. That's challenging for a student because they're very comfortable thinking, you know what? I'm right, you're wrong, oh well. End of discussion. I need them to be able to see the multiple perspectives. I need them to be able to see that you don't have to agree with me, but you do have to understand where I'm coming from. We use project-based learning. Project-based learning allows students to come in at varied entry points within the project, to allow students that opportunity to drive their own learning, to establish those questions and then figure out. The best way to learn something is to figure out what you don't know. Well, if I want students to figure out what they don't know and then have to move forward, it takes time. It takes energy on the part of a teacher. It takes lots of planning. These strategies don't happen overnight. They take planning on the part of teachers. And I was so happy to hear Karen share that if you walk into my classroom, you don't see. It's not like there's these little bubbles and you see, oh, look at what that child's thinking. Look at what that child's thinking. It would be wonderful if we could do that, but we can't. They don't allow that. So what we have to be able to do is understand that many times the differentiation in a classroom isn't visible. You don't know that this group of students is working with one text and this group of students is working with two texts and this group of students is working with two texts and an internet site that they're on. That's a change in complexity. You don't know that this group of students is working with very complex vocabulary, and this group of students is working at a pure grade level. Those things are not readily evident, nor should they be in a classroom. I don't want children to be able to say, oh, well, you know, he's got the harder task. He's got the more challenging task. No. If we are grouping flexibly, every child is being challenged at the level that they need to be challenged, whether they are the highest learner in the class, whether they are the lowest learner in the class. Differentiation strategies are best practice, and we say that over and over again. They're essential for gifted learners, but they're best practice. They should be happening in every classroom, not just in our cluster rooms, not just in our self-contained rooms. They're important for every learner. So these are just some of the things that we do with these students to move them forward, to get them excited. Keeping kids ignited is not easy, particularly when they walk into that classroom feeling like, I already know this. I taught 7th and 8th grade for a number of years. And that was one of the hardest things that I had to deal with were kids who came in feeling like they already had the information and helping them see, oh, honey, you've got this much of the information. I'm going to open up this much to you. So thank you. I'm going to enjoy working with your teachers tomorrow.
Again, I just want to reiterate, we feel like if we communicate well with you and we're open with our communication with our parents of gifted students, we know that we're probably doing good communication with all of our parents, and that's important to us. And we know if we serve our gifted students well, that we're probably doing enough differentiation for all of our students. And so that's something that we keep at the heart of what we're doing here and what we're going to continue doing. So with that, I just want to thank everybody that presented and open it up for additional questions. We just have a bit of time. Like I said, we're going to probably pilot our coffee chat this spring, quickly before the end of the school year. So if you do have some lingering things, we'll put that date out there because I think that will be a good way. If you have if you want to have a longer dialogue about some of the things we've talked about, or if there's some topics that we haven't addressed tonight, so, yeah.
Hi, eighth grader at Sinaloa, sixth, seventh, eighth grade. 3 years, eighth grade, he's gonna graduate. No differentiation has ever taken place in the classroom. And the kids know what other kids are doing, and so they are aware of what assignments other kids are getting. The assignments are the same across the board. It's a very nice presentation. It's not happening in the classroom.
So it's something that we're going to continue working on, because it sounds like I don't have a question there, but I'm sorry that's been the experience for you. So, an additional question? Yeah.
If you go back to the last slide, what he just said, the kids would get different,
Yeah.
they would get different homework. You would see different homework, you would see different essay assignments, you would see different math homework. My kids, well, you're a good teacher. My kids don't
Okay.
have good teachers. They're not getting a different curriculum.
Okay, I'm going to let our teacher answer, because it sounds like she.
Well, we were just actually having a discussion about this. I generally don't give particularly different homework. My kids do have different spelling lists, and that, again, changes on a weekly basis. They can challenge their pretest, and if they do, then they help to create their new list based on whatever concept we're learning. However, hopefully, your kids have worked hard in my classroom from 8:30 until 2:50. And hopefully, we have had rigor that has challenged their thinking, and I've asked them to extend, and I've asked them to be a little uncomfortable, and to trust me in this learning process. I don't want them to go home after that hopefully productive day and get frustrated, because that defeats my whole day. Because then they come in the morning, and what was their last experience? Frustration. So for me, homework, and I can really only speak at this case to fourth grade, for me, homework for them is something that they should absolutely be able to do independently. For me, it's to hit some of those topics that we did, look at it one more time before they go to bed, work with some spelling concepts, but really my number one, and if you ask my fourth graders, my number one homework assignment is that they must read, because that is where it is completely differentiated. And then we can take things from that and utilize them in my classroom, but really, 9 and 10-year-old, my goal is not to send them home with something that's going to frustrate or stump them or wreak havoc in your homes. Because I have been that parent where my kid is crying, trying to complete a homework assignment because they're frustrated. And it's not good for anything. So I can only speak to me, but as far as homework goes, it is to teach them responsibility, getting something home, getting something back. It is to teach them, hopefully, confidence in what we've learned. And aside from that, my goal is absolutely never to give them something that they're going to have to agonize over for hours. We'll do that in class.
My point wasn't about homework, it was about differentiation. Spelling, if you do a pretest and they know the spelling words, then they kids would get different spelling words. If they're accelerated in math, they would have different, a different curriculum within the class. And that kids, in my kid's class, my kids had you, my daughter had you in class, it was great. We don't have you this year, we have different teachers. That's just what it is. It sounds great, but it's not actually being practiced with teachers.
And I think too that just speaks to that process that it's all evolving. So some teachers are doing much more within their classroom, but again, yeah, you may not see differentiation in their homework.
So what I'm hearing and what we continue to communicate is that we do have work to do
Yeah.
to make sure that there are some more consistent experiences. And that's why we continue to bring trainers to work with our teachers so that we can ensure that the experiences are more consistent across the board. And we recognize that you're going to have different experiences depending on different teachers, and teachers have different strengths. And we'll continue to work on that aspects and continue to have our coaching and training around it. So I'm going to take a question over here.
About middle school math. I have a current 7th grader and an incoming 6th grader.
If you can, yeah, the microphone is available right there.
So, so they can't hear you on the recording, so if you just press this.
Yeah. Should be on.
Oh, it's on. Okay. My question's about sixth grade math. I have a seventh grader currently and an incoming sixth grader, and unless something has changed, there wasn't any differentiation in sixth grade math. And I don't think, I say this because they work in groups more than 90% of the time, all the time. And there's no leveling, at least in my child's sixth grade class. So he would be with levels at the two extremes. Groups of 4 kids, you know, it could be him and a D and 2 Fs, and I'm not exaggerating, that happened. So often, so I'm wondering, how is math different? How do they differentiate in math? And he's now in the advanced class, so that's fine. But how are they doing it in sixth grade? How are they going to do it? Because my sixth grade, my next one's my last one in sixth grade.
Okay.
Is there any clustering?
There's not clustering in the math classes. And one of the reasons for that, like I mentioned earlier, is that the giftedness is not necessarily just in mathematics. And we have students that are a broad range in math that we're working, with. So in our sixth grade classes, again, we have an instructional coach, very similar to Jen, who's working with the core teachers, working with our math teachers. And a lot of the strategies that you use in math are somewhat similar to what you heard tonight, but a lot of them also are the ways that the teacher sets up those groups. And it sounds like there is some work to do on how we support the teachers in setting up their classrooms so that they have groups that are functioning at high levels. Grades are not always a good indication to a teacher either, whether or not a student can work well in a group and whether or not they're working at high levels. So, yeah.
In this particular group, my son was trying to explain the problem, and the one other kid was telling him he was an idiot and didn't know what he was talking about. I mean, it wasn't a good match on any level. So, I mean, it's not productive for anybody. So that's what concerns me.
Yeah. We are doing a lot of work. So there's something really important happening in our math classes, but it's probably one of the more difficult teaching strategies to use. But we know that once we perfect this, that it is one of the most effective for increasing students' ability to reason in math. And that's developing students' discourse and ability to talk about math. And what you just described to me is something that we've pinpointed of what we really need to start working with our teachers on, and that is creating a respectful dialogue between students. And with middle school students, it can be a little bit more challenging. So I appreciate that insight because we do know that we have some work to do around that. So, have a question here?
Can you do maybe a class only for gifted kids, only math? Maybe that will solve all the problems?
So again, okay, so her question was, just because we're going to repeat it back into the microphone, is if we can create a math class just for our gifted students. And one of the things that we'll find is that gifted students it's not that group of students that will qualify to move at the compacted rate or even need the classroom to be different in terms of the math. There's a good percentage of gifted students that will qualify to move through the compacted sequence, but that won't necessarily do it. It wouldn't solve the problem necessarily. So, there's a question right here.
So I have a 4th grader at Linwood right now. Do you have a time frame for replacing the 5th grade teacher?
So her question is if we have a timeline for replacing the 5th grade teacher. I'm not the representative from HR, but I know that they are aware of the opening and they'll post and start working on replacing her as quickly as possible. within the same time frame that we use for most of our teachers. I think this is one of the things that our GATE leadership team is also asked about too. So we can work with our assistant superintendent of human resources and kind of get the timeline to our GATE leadership team. But I can't answer that question directly just because that's not necessarily my department right now. So, but
What is the regular time frame for a teacher then? If it's going to
I can't speak to it directly because I don't know. There's processes that have to happen before we can post that I'm not aware of, if that's happened or not. It has been posted. Okay, thank you. Okay, so it's been posted. I don't know if it's been posted internally or externally, but yeah. I'm not sure who was served, so we'll go here. Yeah.
I have a sixth grader, and he was in a self-contained grade class earlier. And the big difference that I see is, the strategies probably are, I don't see he's a sixth grader, so he doesn't share anything from the class. So I don't know the strategies that are implemented in the class, but I do know that the level questioning or tiered assignments do come home. The difference that I see between the self-contained and the cluster is that the self-contained strategies I could see, and I could see the grades that he was getting. Whereas in the sixth grade cluster model, the tiered assignments are optional. The level 1 is mandatory, the rest are optional. And I have questioned him, why is optional, you have to do it. So now, because I put a pressure on him, he's doing it, but it doesn't get graded. So my biggest problem is that
Okay.
if the child, especially a preteen, and as they grow, they're going to take it easy, even though they want to be challenged. But they just like video games. They like everything else that also challenges them.
So what I'm hearing is that you've moved from a self-contained into a sixth grade class, and you've noticed that he's getting tiered lessons, but they're not like a requirement for him to do some of the higher level. And considering that he is a sixth grader moving to middle school, that he may not choose the harder level to do, so maybe not giving that choice. So I think thank you for that insight, feedback.
The teacher too, so that it is optional.
Okay, thank you for that feedback. It's important to know.
Well, thank you for having this discussion and dialogue. I wanted to validate a few things that I heard here today. I have a son, sixth grade in San Jose, and the math program, I have seen differentiated learning. He's doing videos explaining why math works the way that it does. And it took me a little while to understand why that was differentiated, but I've grasped and have gotten that. And I would add, though, that I'm not sure how I feel when he comes home from school most nights of the week, and I ask him about his homework, and his response is, "Oh, I don't have any. I did it all in math class." So I'm just not sure he's really I don't know. I don't know how to feel about that. And there's optional math packets, and he asks for them if I ask him to ask for them. But I think there's more that can be done there.
Okay. So what I'm hearing you saying, in the sixth grade math class, he is getting some differentiation, but he's not getting homework. It's kind of an optional.
He's getting homework that he finishes there, but he also
Okay.
finishes his English homework and his history homework, and it's all done in math class. And so it feels like.
Oh, I see. Okay. So you're feeling like there's still not enough of
Julia.
a push in the math classroom as well. Okay, so it looks like.
And one of the things that we do find with gifted learners is the fact that they don't need a lot of repetitive practice. It isn't necessary. And so typically homework is repetitive practice. It's practice of what you did at school. But the problem is that if I'm a gifted learner, I push back against that because I don't need it. It just frustrates me. And so many times teachers will create learning assignments such that, for example, a gifted math student might take home 2 problems and be asked to solve these, but don't use the algorithm to solve them. You need to solve them 4 different ways, but you can't use the algorithm. And that drives them crazy because they're very algorithmic. And what I want to see is, what is your conceptual understanding of this mathematics? If I take that algorithm away from you, do you conceptually understand the place value, the distributive property, all those other pieces? So oftentimes that could be completed by a student very quickly. And that's great, because that's what I want to know. So sometimes not having homework isn't necessarily a bad thing, because it's like, I don't really need this. I've been challenged at school and I've done what I need to do.
And I think one of the things I just want to add on to that is we've talked a little bit on the GATE leadership team, because this has come up, and we've talked about how do we support parents in engaging their student at home so they continue some of these learning activities. So I think that's also something that we've talked about, trying to bring back some strategies. So that's, yeah, which is not always the most easy thing when you start moving through middle and high school. So, yeah, there's a hand right here.
What is the average class size in middle school math class? Because I have some friends who are teachers, and they have expressed to me that it's very hard to differentiate learning when you have a large class.
Mm-hmm.
What is the average class size?
So I couldn't tell you off the top of my head what the average class size is, but our class limit generally runs around 31. So they would run around that area. And for the majority of teachers, you know, that's one of the reasons that this is very closely talked about between the teachers and administration, is that usually is a reasonable number for a teacher to be able to differentiate. But I mean, we can certainly pull and take a look and see if there's a grade level that may be trending higher than that, but I don't have the specific answer for like what our average class size is. It will trend right around 31. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Why, a question,
Yeah.
at the district level, a policy decision, why does there seem to be a refusal to push the GATE program back to the way it was 4 or 5 years ago, when there were greater numbers of GATE students per class? And why is there this insistence on this small group number clustering model, which makes differentiation so much harder?
Well, one of the things that I want to be real clear about is that for a teacher, having a smaller cluster number of gifted students, that doesn't necessarily make differentiation more difficult. What we do find is that having a smaller number of gifted students with another group of students that are not necessarily our high achievers supports that teacher in having a smaller range of students to differentiate to, and that's the cluster model. Not necessarily. And one of the things that you know, we're going to continue to communicate about with the cluster model is that we never had a self-contained model at the middle school. What we've always had was a larger cluster of gifted students, and then it was backfilled with students that requested that classroom. And there was a perception, because a lot of those students were labeled as gifted in the class, that there was a perception all the students in that class were gifted. Yeah. Yeah. Because we find what is best for students, both our gifted students as well as our teachers' ability to serve students, is to set it up in the cluster model that we found with Dr. Bruez, and that's one of the reasons we continue to work with them to make sure that that model works the best for our kids. And it also is for our students coming out of the self-contained. We also realize that this is a transition period into high school, where you have all types of different choices and classes, and so having that transition from a self-contained into a cluster model and then into the high schools where there's all kinds of different classes that will have a very diverse student body and provides students kind of that slow release.
And Julia, may I add to this a little bit? In my research of other districts, the backfilled model that you're referring to, some school districts have actually been called out by the Office of Civil Liberties for not having that equity piece. So we have to be very careful in how we proceed and make sure that we're being equitable with how we place our students.
So I want to recognize that we've gone a little over time. Again, we really appreciate you guys coming out and asking your questions and being attentive listeners, and we again welcome you to continue to engage with us on how we can better serve your students. We hope to do a little pilot of that coffee chat this spring, so if you're interested, we'll probably do that. It's going to be during the day, but we'll probably do it at the beginning of the day, so if you can run into work a little later, you might be able to meet with us. So thank you again. Have a great evening. Oh, and please fill out the survey if you have not done so already. Is that what you remind? Oh, and sign in. The link was on the letter or the email that you had. Okay.